that the fractal-based pattern of the Elliott wave principle is showing a deterministic wave pattern in mass mood, and historical events that shape mass mood unfold according to that deterministic wave pattern. So swings in mass motion in an Elliott wave fractal-based pattern are deterministic, and they are in the actual specific events that we experience collectively are probabilistic particulars in the context of that deterministic wave pattern. This connects to, of course, for those who are familiar with quantum physics, the wave-particle duality. That you have that reality as we know it, and this is really the best science at this point with regard to understanding reality in its most basic form, quanta, and the most basic particular particles of reality, is that reality is in a sense a deterministic wave pattern until you measure it. So when we are, and of course what are we but these sentient beings that are busy always measuring the reality around us with our senses. So we experience history as probabilistic particulars, and collective experiences are the probabilistic particulars of history and the major historical events that we collectively experience. So what I'm saying is that history is in a sense a underlying deterministic wave pattern. It's a pre-written story that we read with our senses. We experience through our senses, and when we measure it, it performs, it seems to be probabilistic, it performs as probabilistic particulars, but in reality underlying the wave pattern is it's deterministic. So it's just like we're in a pre-written story. When we measure it and read the story that we're within, it seems that it's random and probabilistic in terms of the particulars that we sense, but the bottom line is that it is in fact predetermined and pre-written. Now that seems difficult to comprehend, particularly for those of the secular faith, but in terms of religion, this is sort of the sense of how things work. That's where, of course, prophecy comes into play, because the whole upshot of Nostradamus, ancient prophecies, and most importantly biblical prophecy, is that in order for prophecy to be possible, the story has to be pre-written. In other words, for Jesus Christ or any of the prophets of the past to have foreseen this apocalypse spelled out in the book of Revelation of a future nuclear war, future war, I believe a war between East and West, Russia and the United States, for that to, starting in the Middle East, of course, for that to have been foreseen 2,000 years ahead of time, the only possible way to explain that is there must be some author aware of how the story is going to unfold, who conveys information, foreshadowing, if you will, regarding future events that will unfold before they occur and before it's even possible to ever surmise what is going to occur. So the only way to know that there's future chapters ahead of time is if there's an author who's already written the story that knows future chapters ahead of time and can convey information about it to people within the story before those chapters unfold. So the whole upshot of religion and religious prophecy is that we are in a pre-written story, and this is precisely what the Elliott wave principle the implication of the Eluate principle is that there is a sound foundation, the empirical truth to what of the one of the most basic tenets of world religion. Now, with regard to where we stand now, we reversed from 15,000 in connection with this chemical attack in Syria, and because this crossed the red line that President Obama had drawn a year prior to the day, actually, the United States and Western powers are contemplating military action against Syria. Now, my whole point has been the whole Syrian thing is just a trap. It's a setup for the West to walk into, for America to walk into, step into. And that should be clear in the case of the current crisis, is that the day that this chemical attack occurred was just days after the UN team to investigate far older chemical attacks, possible chemical attacks in Syria. They had just arrived in Damascus. They were only a few kilometers away from the site where the purported chemical attack by the Syrian regime on rebels occurred. So why would Bashar Assad's regime not step over the red line with regard to the use of chemical weapons just days after a UN team arrives in the country, in Damascus, right where this is going to happen, to investigate the possibility of Syrian government using chemical weapons? Unless, of course, the Syrian regime intended to step over the line. And if the intent was to step over the line and provoke an attack, it begs the question as to what strategy is unfolding. And my point has long been that Syria is just a puppet state of Russia. Russia is always been gaming for world conquest at the expense of the United States, at the expense of the Western powers, but they needed to do so in a manner that the world would blame the Western powers for the Third World War that they're planning. And so what you have is a situation where over the past 20 years, not only have we gradually built down the nuclear arsenal in the Western nations, the United States, and our strategic capabilities, but we've slowly been drawn into multiple conflagrations with former puppet states of the Soviet Union that makes America look like the imperialist bad guy. And Israel is right there attached to the United States. It's all about stoking anti-Semitism, stoking hatred against the United States, vilifying Israel and America and our Western allies, so to create an excuse for unleashing World War III, such that after the dust settles, it's like we brought it on ourselves. But the reality is, we haven't brought it on ourselves. We've been set up from the get-go. And I'm here to upset our enemies' grand plans.